Hello and welcome to CMC. I'm Darren Maloney, a member of the CMC Board of Trustees. It's great to see everyone today. Thanks for coming out. Today's forum, welcome to Frederic Bertley, new COSI CEO, is sponsored by our friends at COSI Construction, represented today by Jim Negron and his colleagues. Won't you please help me thank them? So thank you, COSI. Our speaker began his new position as president and CEO of COSI on January 1st, moving here from Philadelphia, where he was a senior vice president for science and education at the Franklin Institute. As you will see, he shares a great enthusiasm for science. Please welcome Mr. Frederic Bertley. Following Dr. Bertley's remarks, he will join OSU Professor Emeritus Herb Asher for a conversation. Frederic, the podium is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm 13 weeks in Columbus, 12 weeks at COSI, and I just want to thank the many people who I have met in this room and the rest of you all. I mean, this has been a tremendous community. You welcomed myself and my wife in tremendous ways, and we couldn't be happier to be part of the new Columbus team. So give yourselves a round of applause for that. It's a great, great city. Secondly, they always do this to you last minute. My team represented at this table over here has given me a duty, so I do have to do a little commercial for our fundraiser. It's called Blast. On your table, you will see one of these. Feel free to pick it up, and you can contact anybody on our team, or just look on the flyer and figure out how to get tickets. It's April 22nd. It's a fantastic fusion of science, fun, and coolness at COSI. Third, and this is my last announcement, it's a privilege for me to spearhead COSI. I've been at an incredible science center in the Northeast, Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. COSI, like the Franklin Institute, is one of the top 10 in the country. And it's made that way because it's had a history of fantastic leadership from Roy Schaefer to Kathy Sullivan. But I also want to recognize my predecessor, because I saw him sneak in here, Dr. David Chesbro. Thank you for leaving COSI in such an incredible situation. And I couldn't be more honored to follow your footsteps. So with that, I think I have about 25 minutes to chat with you all, and then we're going to have hopefully a fun discussion with the longest tenured, most amazing individual from Ohio State University over here. All right, but I want to start with data. I'm a scientist by training, so can I ask a few questions and collect some data from you all? Is that all right? All right, so first of all, how many of you have texted today? Show of hands. All right, so you all in the front, all the hands are going up in the back. How many of you had a prescription from a doctor in the last 4 years? Everybody. How many of you eat food? Right? How many of you wear clothes? Every day? All right. And the last question, how many of you are sitting in the building? Right? So we all are. So these questions sound funny, but they really underscore the point that in this 21st century, we are really in a science and technology replete world. You can think about it. You wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is grab your cell phone. You know, what did our president tweet? Who texted me what? You know, or if you eat food, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, unless you shop religiously at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, 99% of the foods you are ingesting are genetically modified. Whether it's good or bad, that's not what this talk is about, but that's just stuff that you need to know. The clothes we wear, right? Material scientists have spent millions, if not billions of dollars figuring out how to do this. And Tammy, where is she? And Tammy corrected me the other day from L. Brown's, because she knows all the science behind that, which is fantastic. But it's incredible. And the building we're sitting in, none of you until this remark are worried about the concrete and cement and steel that could come crashing down any minute and crush us. Why? Because scientists and engineers have spent a lot of time figuring this out. So we really are dependent on science and technology. So the question is, where do we go from here? Right? Well, there's a group of the greatest engineers in this country called the National Academy of Engineers, circa 2000, came up with what they call the grand challenges. These are 14 challenges that if we in this country can figure this out, we'll make not only this country a better country, we'll make the world a better world. Everything from harnessing solar energy, from reverse engineering the brain, understanding the nitrogen cycle, cybersecurity, all these big challenges that if we can solve them, we'll make this place better. Well, how do you solve them? You've all heard the term science, technology, engineering, math. That's how we're going to solve these great problems that our society is impacted by. So What I want to do quickly is just run you through some of these cool technological advances that are happening right now in real time. So this is a photograph of something called a quantum dot. It's a nanoparticle, right? You can't see with the eyes. It's 1 × 10⁻⁹, really small. But it has this peculiar capacity to hold light and emit it very slowly in bright ways. Here are some small jars holding a liquid form of these quantum dots, these nanoparticles. And you're like, well, what can you do with them? Well, they're revolutionizing imaging for medicine. So you know we have the X-ray and you have MRI and CT scans. Well, there's a new set of imaging that's going to be coming online that leverages this stuff that's going to be faster and quicker and easily make our capacity for our physicians to easily identify tissues and damages. So for example, how many of you all did biology in high school? Right? All right, so pretty much everybody. You remember that experience where the teacher had you swath your cheek cells? Right? Did you guys do that? And you had to put on a glass and look under the microscope, right? Remember that? And you put a little pink stain on it, and the teacher said, oh, can you see the nucleus? And I'm like, yes, Mrs. Riverside, I could see the nucleus. You know we all lied. You couldn't see the nucleus, right? But imagine this. I mean, these are some cells that are stained with these quantum dots. You can show this to a 4-year-old, and you can immediately show them where the nucleus is, even the DNA, the pink stuff inside the membrane. This is made possible today by science. But the coolest thing with quantum dots is this. Looks like conventional paint. It's not. It's got these chemoluminescent particles. You take the paint, you roll it on the ceiling or on the wall, you take a small wire, electric current, flick a switch, and this paint glows, revolutionizing lighting forever. This is unbelievable. Now, this stuff's not available today, so please don't go and say the new president, CEO, Dr. B at Lowe's said we can get this. You can't get it yet, but this is going to revolutionize lighting. I mean, it's well beyond CFLs and LEDs, and it's going to be really cheap as well. All right, what about the field of engineering? Any engineers here? All right, well, bless you all. So amazing things. I mean, I like cars. Most people like cars. We use cars. Here's an example of a very expensive Italian car, not environmentally friendly, huge carbon footprint. Well, some colleagues at the MIT Media Lab are working on a new kind of car. All right, here's a cartoon of it. The car actually folds, but can seat 2 full-grown adults. Here are prototypes of these cars. And you'd get in the car now. You won't own it anymore. You'll check it out like a grocery cart. You'll drive to your destination, put it back, go about your business, and take another one. Environmentally friendly, gets up to about 40 miles per hour, reduces not just environmental pollution and whatnot, but also reduces traffic pollution, and really, really cool, right? All right, how about Dean Kamen? You all know who this person is? If you don't recognize him, he's the person who invented the Segway, right? He's pretty much the country's greatest engineer right now, has about 440 patents. And while he's known for the Segway and the wheelchair that can climb stairs, his greatest invention is actually these black boxes that you're looking at. It's called a slingshot. If you're a Netflix person, just look up Slingshot. There's a great documentary on it. And what they do is they make purified, drinkable water out of any liquid source. Use your imagination. When I say this, the kids are like, do you mean pee-pee? I'm like, yes, even urine. And he will drink it right in front of you. Now, we take it for granted here in the U.S. You know, you turn on your tap. I mean, notwithstanding Flint, Michigan, you turn on your tap, you get drinkable water. That was a little joke. Sorry, I wanted, you can shower. We have access to clean water. Well, ladies and gentlemen, 2/3 of the world does not. And if that doesn't impress you, 50% of the deaths that happen on planet Earth happen because communities don't have access to clean water. Can you imagine? And so this is now being tested in 14 villages around the world, bringing clean water to populations that used to have to hike 6 or 8 hours for a bucket of dirty water. Incredible. And while he went to UNICEF, while he went to the UN, while he went to WHO, nobody wanted him to go to scale. Finally, Coca-Cola was like, this is great. I can be part of a clean water movement, and so that's why you see his machine now wrapped with this Coca-Cola piece. Really incredible. I'm a life scientist, so I want to quickly talk about some really cool things that are happening in the genomic space. Everybody recognize this? If you have kids, you do. Right? You remember the name of the movie? Right, Finding Nemo. So I got some good news and some bad news. And what do you want to hear first? All right, well, I'm going to tell you good news. So we found Nemo, right? But as life scientists, we pulled out the DNA. This is a true story, by the way. We pulled out the DNA, right? And then we cloned it, meaning we just made photocopies of it. And the way we do that is you put in bacteria replicates, you get all this DNA that you want. And then we injected it in a tomato. Now you guys are like, Dr. B, what are you talking about? So it's it's kind of a true story. I told a little fib. It wasn't really Nemo, but it was a real fish. It's called the Canadian Arctic whitefish, and it lives in the Arctic Ocean. And you know that the Arctic Ocean is very cold. If you and I fall in the Arctic Ocean, we got about maybe 15 minutes where we can survive. Otherwise, we'll die because our bodies can't thermoregulate. We can't handle that cold temperature. But there's certain wildlife that can. Polar bears, the Arctic whitefish. So biologists identified the sequence of genes, the DNA piece, that actually codes for the fish to handle that cold temperature, and they put it in a tomato, because if you're a tomato farmer, you know you can grow 3 to 4 months of your crops, but you get that one frost night in September, October, and you lose everything. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to genetically modified organisms. Again, this is not a lecture on that. We can talk about that offline if you want, but this is happening right now. And it's in all kinds of stuff. But probably the most exciting yet interesting area is in the field of robotics. We're all dependent by it. If you drive a car, unless you own a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, these cars are all produced by robots. Very few hands touch them. If you've ordered anything from Amazon or Amazon Prime, it goes from your handheld device or your laptop to the company, goes to a robot, runs down, the robot goes down a row, picks your package off, sends it to another robot that wraps it, puts it to a third robot that puts a label on, boom, you get it to your house, right? Fine. There's a new kind of robotics movement. This is a gentleman, scientist at Queensland University in Australia. He created these two robots, and when he turns them on, the first thing they do is they learn to stand, just like a baby. Then they learn to recognize each other. Then they actually created de novo language to communicate. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not talking about he programmed the computers to recognize Japanese, Swahili, Italian, English, French. We've been doing that for decades. I'm talking about when he activated these machines, they created a new language. Not only did they teach it to each other, they actually taught it to the people in the lab. Now, the thing that distinguishes, or one of the things that distinguishes humans, is that capacity for higher thinking and language development and communications. So this is, blurring the lines for carbon-based, and organic-based life forms like us and what silicone life can be. I'm not judging it, but when you think about this kind of stuff, is this an issue, right? All right. So I hope to have convinced you that there's some really cool things that are happening in science and technology right now, and we really are in a high-tech society. And if you think about jobs, if you all have children and you're worried about what kind of jobs you're going to have, well, there's all kinds of literature talking about science, technology, engineering, and math, and how that's impacting the economy, and how there's so many jobs. In fact, they estimate by the year 2020, 50%, half of all the jobs in this country are going to be directly or peripherally related to science, technology, engineering, and math. I know we have a chemist undergrad somewhere in here. This is not chemistry, but biology. This is a number of jobs, just a sample of the kinds of jobs you can have with just a bachelor's in biology. Same thing in engineering. There are all these fields. It's not just mechanical, electrical, or civil, but there's a plethora of fields in engineering. So, moving right along, if STEM is everywhere, and we're completely dependent on it, and innovation is really cutting edge, and there's a lot of career opportunities, what's the problem, right? Well, there are several problems, but there are three major problems. One is, while we're dependent on science, all of us, in everything we do. I mean, if you don't believe me, see if you can get through tomorrow without relying on some type of technology or science, right? Fine. Yet, if I ask you all, and right now I'm just not going to put you on the spot. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. If I ask you all, who's the first scientist you think about when you think about a scientist? There you go. This is not a magic show, all right? If I'm asking a group of women, name me a scientist, who do you say? Okay, so we got some savants out here that are talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson. Fair enough, all right. And this is not the right crowd. You guys are all professional and educated. But in general, they'll say Marie Curie. And if it's Black History Month, or you're speaking to a group of African Americans, who do we say? George Washington Carver. You know that peanut guy, right? All right. Now, what's the issue here? They're all dead. Now, let me just be clear. I'm a student of history. I love history, and it's important to recognize, and these are obviously three amazing scientists. But if you're trying to motivate the next generation of people that are going to take care of this planet, it's not going to work with Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, and a dead peanut guy. It's not going to happen. And so if I push the envelope now and I ask you guys to name a living scientist, you start scratching your head. You're like, there's this weird guy. He's in a wheelchair. He talks funny. That's right, Stephen Hawking, right? They made that great Hollywood movie about him. So the point is, despite the fact that we're so dependent on science, we don't know who these people are. So for more crowd participation, I want to collect some data. Do we have active scientists right now walking our communities that are doing great things? Does anybody know the person on the right? All the women are like, that's Sean Connery, right? Person on the left, all right, that's Dr. Paul Barron. 1977 came out with something called packet switching, which is the foundation for the internet. Imagine your life without internet. We all depend on it. We have no idea who invented it, right? What about the person on the left here, right? We all recognize him, the great actor, Morgan Freeman, the voice of God, I think, in one of the movies. The person on the right is Professor James West. He and his German colleague, Gerhard Sessler, came up with the Electret microphone, which is in 100% of the cell phones on the planet. We're all dependent on cell phones, yet we have no idea who came up with that. And by the way, myself included, right? Like, I didn't know these people until I started preparing these kinds of talks. Here we have Martha Stewart on the right. The person on the left is Dr. Sandra Faber. She's at University of California, Santa Barbara. She discovered black holes. I mean, talk about bragging rights. Imagine you're the person who figured out black holes, right? And then lastly, we have this guy. We know Jackie Chan, a great martial artist, great actor. Person on the right, no one's heard of him. His name is Jeff Hahn. Well, he was a triple major at Columbia University, dropped out of studying mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and physics, and he came up with the touch screen. One of the very first TED Talks that propelled that whole institution of TED Talks was this gentleman releasing the touchscreen to the world. Just amazing technology, right? So they do exist. So why don't we know these folks? I mean, we know singers, dancers, entertainment people, well, it's not breaking news. It's the media, right? The media is lopsided, and we have a rep here, so I hope that you will continue to come to these great events and celebrate science. But really, and I love sports, I love entertainment, I watch TV like the rest of us, but I think there should be a balance that the men and women that are doing the remarkable things that we depend upon should be celebrated like a LeBron James or a Cindy Crawford or whomever. So is there hope? Well, we're kind of getting there, right? The most popular show in 2012 to 2016 has been this. Right? And I say partially getting there because even though this is a well-written, funny show, it's still the characteristic, nerdy, geeky person, right? Well, we've moved that a little bit. Now you got things like CSI, bringing the sexy and cool into science and stuff, so that's good. But we still have a long ways to go, right? What's the second problem? The second problem is our public school system. This is the picture of the first. Actually, this is not the exact school. This is a rendition of the first public school that started in this country. It's called Boston Latin. It's still in existence, started in 1635. Harvard, as we know it, opened a year later, 1636, to take the kids who went through Boston Latin and further their education. All right. Right? Used to walk to school. So this is a real picture of Boston Latin, circa 1820s. And what do you all notice? All boys. So they fixed that. They had an all-girls school later on. And then down the road, they finally integrated that. So all boys. What else do you notice? They look very, very miserable, right? It's funny. I presented this, and they do. I presented this, and somebody said, it was the funniest thing, a sidebar here. Somebody said, Frederic, the reason why they look miserable is this is in the 1820s, and when you took a picture, you had to pose for like 7 minutes just to get it. So that may be true, but you can tell they're clearly not happy. And you got desks and rows, but you had these two people in the back. There were these magical wizards. They had all this information in their head, and they'd lecture to you, and you'd write everything down, and then you'd memorize it. Then every 2 weeks, you'd have a test, and you'd regurgitate everything you memorized. That was school 200 years ago, and it made sense because that's how you transferred information. But that doesn't apply to the 21st century, right? I mean, think about it. You don't take a horse and buggy for the most part. If you're Amish, you do, but if you're not Amish, you don't take a horse and buggy to go to work. You don't communicate by drumming or smoke signals or even a telegraph or a telephone, right? The medicines we eat, we're not chewing on tree bark anymore. Every aspect of society has moved forward except our education system, for the most part. In these public schools in urban cities, you see desks and rows, and actually it's worse than that. Their seats are empty. Right? Kids are tuned out. This is where kids are. They're obsessed by technology. And you don't need to have somebody like me lecture to you for an hour. You just go on the internet and find the information instantly. So we need a whole new kind of system that helps kids figure out how they mine information, how they ask good questions, how they process stuff, and how they move things forward. So we really need new ideas. And so we talk about changing the DNA of STEM education, where it's not just a school anymore in some kind of off-site place that's disconnected from the world, but really that it's integrated with a suite of technology. If you have it, it's connected to the academy and the industry, and that's why I love Columbus as a collaborating city. You're all willing to work together. The community needs to be engaged, and in places like COSI, as an informal science center, can do a lot to enrich that education experience. The third problem, and this is near and dear to my heart, is unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a less and less STEM literate society. And this is not my personal opinion. There's a lot of research done by AAAS, Yale, YouGov. National Science Foundation has looked in this for the last 15, 20 years, and here's what they found, and here's what they're showing us. Nobody in this room, but ladies and gentlemen, 1/4 of Americans still believe the Earth is the center of the universe and the sun revolves around us. Right? All right. How about climate change, right? This is a cute cartoon. You got the elf saying the jury's still out. Meanwhile, the whole North Pole is melting away, right? And so it's a little better here. We have 69% of Americans think that climate change does exist. Then you look at stuff like this. On the top left, you're looking at viruses. On the bottom right, you're looking at bacteria. And this may not have happened to you. It may have. It certainly has happened to me, and I know it's happened to other people outside this room. You go to the doctor. You're not feeling well. The doctor says, oh, I think you have a viral infection. And what does he or she do? There you go. They write you a prescription for an antibiotic. Now, it's called antibiotic because it's antibacterial. Very effective in general against bacteria, absolutely useless to viruses. This happens all the time. And it's a big problem because now you're going to hospitals and people are dying from these superbugs because now you got these multi-drug resistant stuff that we can't cope with because of the terrible overusage and misprescription of antibiotics, right? Perhaps my favorite is this. Dinosaurs. Over 40% of Americans believe that humans and dinosaurs existed on the planet at the same time. Now, bear with me for a minute. This I give a pass to. I'm a 70s, 80 kid, and I grew up on Hanna-Barbera, and one of my favorite cartoons, you all know it, Flintstones, right? Remember this guy, Kazoo, the green guy with the funny helmet? And he used to snap his fingers and give Fred Flintstones whatever his wish was. Well, but what did Fred do every day? When he went to work, he got into that car, which was bizarre because it had no floor and he'd use his feet. You remember that? Anyway, he got in his car and he went to work. And he sat on the back of a dinosaur and he was coring all day. And so as a kid, you're growing up thinking, oh, of course they coexisted, but they didn't, right? And so when I talk about what do we need new ideas to impact this science literacy. And that's where institutions like COSI have a tremendous leg up. Because we have some fantastic universities here in this community. We have fantastic universities around the country. But when you want to know if climate change is real or not, if you want to know what's the history and work of vaccines, or if you want to understand how cancer drugs work, or if you want to have any questions around science, you're not going to go to Capitol. And a shout out for our prez out there. You're not going to go to Capitol or Ohio State or Audubon. You're not going to go to Harvard, or MIT, or McGill into the hallowed halls of Ivory Tower to ask your questions. A, they probably won't let you in. They'll think you're crazy. But B, even if they let you in, it's an intimidating space. But you'll come to COSI and science centers like that are able to bring science alive, make it interesting, exciting, and get you to want to learn more. And so just real quick, some of the fun things we have at COSI. We have a fantastic suite of exhibitions. That's part and parcel of what we do. Right now we have Mindbenders, but we've got a great planetarium. I mean, these are one of these things that resonates with everybody. Everybody loves looking up at the night sky. And if you can't afford a telescope, fine. Come to the planetarium, which ours is state-of-the-art and appreciate some really cool things. We also have a Nat Geo cinema that shows some great movies. This one in particular, Dream Big, really talks about the wonderful field of engineering and what you can do if you just want to dream big. And lastly, but not least, is this November we'll be unveiling dinosaurs. And this is going to be a game changer because everybody can resonate with dinosaurs. But along with those exhibits and great movies and cinema, we also have programs. We do programs for little kids. I mean, you talk about a light bulb moment or an aha moment. Look how excited these kids are. Here's another program called GlaxoSmithKline Science in the Summer we'll be doing. You can tell just by looking at that photograph that these kids are so engaged. But it's not just about kids and families. It's the adults, too. We have a program called COSI After Dark that gets the 21 to 40-year-olds really excited around science. We have all these things. You walk around a museum, you interact and learn different things about science. Of course, we sell beer, wine, and alcohol. That also helps. But it's really good that we can get that population to come back to these cultural institutions like a COSI and be excited. So why do we do all this? When you talk about a picture being worth 1,000 words, this is the daughter of a colleague of mine. Check her out at a butterfly exhibit at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. She is absolutely so intensely curious about what is up with that butterfly. And ladies and gentlemen, kids are born curious. That's how we learn to walk, talk. And it's our role as society, and it's especially our role in cultural institutions, to maintain that curiosity and allow them to achieve whatever they want to achieve, whether it's a PhD in pharmacology to make sure we're not misprescribing antibacterial stuff, or if they want to study literature or be a regular worker, just having some level of scientific questioning and answering, and that acuity can go a long way. And so with that, I couldn't be more happy to shepherd this space. And while we're a science institution, and it is all about science, more than that, ladies and gentlemen, COSI is a cultural institution, right? And it's really about people. And so I couldn't be more excited to be part of what you all have called the Scioto Peninsula Park. I have renamed it, and I will share this with you, as the People's Peninsula. COSI is part of Columbus. It's part of the wonderful cultural institutions here that are doing some really cool things. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful. And confirmation of that is I just received a tweet from Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway, who said, "Oh my goodness, who knew? We didn't realize science." So, and they said, we're gonna tell our boss that science is good. And then they said, and Steve Bannon may get back to you. Now that was bad on my part, but one of the questions, and it really does link into your concerns about science education, science literacy. We have seen, and this is from all sides of the political spectrum, the politicization of science. So whether it involves climate research, genetically modified organisms, vaccines, in older days, the validity of tobacco research linking it to cancer and things like that. This politicization, how much do you worry about it, and what can we do about it?
I mean, so first of all, don't think that I'm not intimidated up here with this gentleman who's a 45-year-old veteran at Ohio State and a scholar. And so I'm humbled to be next to you and to be fielding these questions. That's a big, important question, because science is apolitical. People think science is about facts, and it's not. All science is a democratic process of coming up with a question, you're curious about whatever, then figuring out how to research that question, collect the data, and make an analysis of the data, and then form a conclusion. And the thing about science is it moves the ball forward. For example, 4,000 years ago, we thought scientifically that the Earth was flat. That's a reality. Then some dude named Copernicus came along, realized, wait a minute, this is not right, and found out that the Earth is actually round. But we found out that the Earth is round because the process of science of keep asking questions and getting more data got us to a closer truth, and that is that the Earth is indeed flat. And so the fact that it gets kind of labeled or caught into and used as a political hot potato is terrible, because the scientific industry doesn't subscribe to that. Now, when you have things like the National Science Foundation and NASA and the National Institutes of Health that are government organizations that are funding you, that's where sometimes things get gummed up. But science itself is a series of asking questions, collecting the data, and making a decision on the data, and that's not political.
But how do we then educate ourselves, and this was really one of your points, so that when we hear preposterous things, we say, well, no, that's not, for example, I remember having conversations years ago with an elderly relative who said, please stop smoking. And they would say, well, wait a second. My brother's been smoking for 50 years and is in perfect health. I don't believe this research. And you try to sort of say, but it's sort of a matter of odds and chance and things like that. Or you're talking about the climate, and you say, oh, we had our coldest winter ever. Don't ever tell me about global warming. And you really get a sense here that for a lot of people, they don't understand the points. So
smoking is a great example. I mean, the data was clear that smoking is directly linked to cancer and a whole lot of other diseases. Why did it take so long? Well, it was connected to a very big industry called the tobacco industry, and they were fighting it. Oh, the scientists are wrong. We have all these reports sponsored by tobacco companies saying science is wrong. And finally, it was clear that, okay, the science was right. There's a direct correlation, and that's why you have institutions that are still today in 2017 leveraging tobacco money because that lawsuit and that class action suit was so large. That's one. Two, for me, what's fascinating is where people choose to get their information from. So for example, if you have heart disease, you're going to go to a cardiologist, right? Fair enough. If your toilet's not working or you have some plumbing issue in your house, if you're handy, it's one thing, but if you're not handy, you're probably going to call a plumber. If your car breaks down, you're going to go to an auto mechanic. But for some reason, it's okay to get your information about vaccines from Jenna McCarthy and Oprah Winfrey. You're laughing, but these are the people that have pushed that anti-vaccine campaign forward. I'm all about objective analysis and ask questions, but if I want to know if vaccines are dangerous or not, I want to speak to immunologists who've spent 20, 30, 40 years doing the research, just like I would take my car to an auto mechanic and not to LeBron James. And so in terms of this, for some reason, and I don't know really how we got here, for some reason, even though people are comfortable not knowing anything about science, I mean, we've had this discussion just the other day, right? If you were illiterate, you're not proud of that. That's like not a good thing. Or if your family's illiterate, that's not good, and you try everything to help them be literate. You're not expecting them to be Maya Angelou or William Shakespeare, but you want them to read and write. Same thing with counting, right? I mean, you need to count to do your timetables. No one's going to say you're Benjamin Banneker, that African-American mathematician, or Albert Einstein, but you expect to count. But for some reason, it's okay to not know anything about science. There's a comfort in not knowing that. Yet, even though we're comfortable not knowing about it, we're also comfortable going to non-experts to get the opinion. And that's true with climate change. I mean, the data is clear. We were having this conversation earlier around climate change. If you were diagnosed with a terrible disease, right? Unfortunately. If you're diagnosed with a terrible disease, you're going to go to your doctor. Then you're probably going to go to a second doctor, get a second opinion, right? You might go to a third doctor. Imagine you went to 99 doctors, and 99 doctors said you have disease X and one didn't. Imagine you went to 999 doctors, and they all said you have the disease and one didn't. You would assume you have the disease, right? For some reason, you can go to 999 scientists that will tell you climate change is real, and you'll find one scientist in Zimbabwe that says it's not, and all of a sudden, it's right? It's this weird thing of how we get our knowledge. And we're in Ohio. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest climate scientologists, climate change experts, are right here at Ohio State University. It's a husband and wife team called
Lonnie Thompson
and Ellen Mosley Thompson. That's right here. And so I just find it interesting that people are comfortable having their opinions with no data and then going to people who aren't experts. It's an interesting kind of psychological phenomenon that's happening.
You had mentioned the media before, and I know when we watch TV, we'll oftentimes have reporters who are particularly skilled in talking about the latest medical study. But when it comes to other aspects of science, there's almost a vacuum there. So let's really get to the media, journalists, but the whole question of how do we train both people who deliver the news about science, but also we, the recipients, and especially the young people who are now growing up in an era where they have access, as you said, to so much information, and so much of it is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important question. I think, scientists, we owe ourselves, we owe ourselves a lot of the blame because we reinforce that stereotype that only 3 people on the planet can understand our language, and it's this whole distant thing, and you guys aren't smart enough, and it's nonsense. And so that's problem number 1, that scientists need to be more engaged. So for instance, we have Dr. Paul Sutter, our chief scientist. I mean, he's fantastic at translating science and making it come alive and making it accessible. So that's 1, we as scientists need to do a better job. But 2, back to the media, it's a tough question for me because as I presented in my notes, I like sports. I'm not pretending I don't. I watch Netflix. I like some good, television shows. I don't know why the media hasn't latched on to the amazing things that have come about through science and technology, aside from, as you said, just a medical. You know, if someone cures breast cancer, or I was an HIV vaccine biologist, you know, if I came up with the HIV vaccine, that would be popular. You know, then the vaccine would be popular for a long time. I would fade into oblivion. But how do we get things to be more topical around general science? It's a great question, and you know, we have. You know, at the next discussion, I'd love to have some media partners to talk about how can we do that, because it is exciting. I mean, when you make science come alive, it's the coolest thing. I'll give you an example. Does anybody know what f of x equal to log x base 10? Right? I see some heads shaking, oh my gosh, right? You got scared, right? Heard it's mathematics, oh my God. You can show this to college undergraduates, and if they see f of x, which is a function, equal to log x base 10, they mess themselves, right? They're nervous. It's like, it's math, I'm terrible at math. Yet you can go to 4-year-olds, to 6-year-olds, or 10-year-olds who also don't claim they don't like math, and ask them if they want $1. They'll be like, oh, Dr. B, sure, give me $1. Ask them if they want $10, they'll get more excited. Ask them if they want $100, they'll be jumping out the seats. And if you offer them $1,000, they will bow at your greatness and be like, you're the best person ever. Well, they fully understood at the age of 4 or 6 or 10 f of x is equal to log, it's just logarithmic expansion base 10. But it's not taught in a way that's digestible. So now all of you understand that log equation, and it can be simplified. And so, you know, it gets back to we need to do a better job as scientists, making it more accessible, more enjoyable, more engageable, and then we need to find media partners that see how fun and cool this can be, because it's what keeps us alive. You know, the unbelievable development that this city is going through in Columbus, with the cranes all over the place and what I call the People's Peninsula, that's all made possible through science and engineering and the great architects and engineers that make, like, that's all real. And it's exciting. I hope I'm not the only person that finds this exciting in the room, but you know, it's exciting stuff.
Are there schools, school districts, in this country that you're aware of? Are there countries throughout the world that do what you would consider to be a good job in science education?
Absolutely. So there's a school right here, first of all, I'm going to blank on the name, the Metro STEM School, right? That's affiliated with Columbus State and Ohio State University, et cetera. So to answer your question, there are definitely great examples in this country. And I want to peel back actually and mention something that you all have probably heard in the media for the last 10 years. You hear these studies when they look at how are our American children doing in terms of science education compared to countries across the world, right? And you always hear the message, oh my God, we're horrible, we're 22nd in math, and we're 31st in science behind, you know, some developing world countries, literally. And that is true when you aggregate the whole country of us versus Finland or versus Canada, right? But when you disaggregate and you look at the cream of the crop, our kids in this country are crushing it. We are number 1, 2, or 3 with the best kids across the world. But that's a very small minority of kids who live in really, you know, affluent areas that get access to schools that have alternative, hands-on, really cool educational systems. So we have great, this is a sad part for me, we have great examples in this country, in this state, in this city. How do we go to scale to make sure all kids in the Columbus public school district get access to schools like Metro STEM School, et cetera? And so we have the capacity here, we have the technology here, we have, you know, a great set of teachers and infrastructure to support it. We just haven't taken it to scale in an effective way.
What's your role in leading the charge on this effort?
I mean, that's a great question, and that's why I'm so excited to be at COSI specifically, but at science centers in general. We have the capacity to, because we're not going to solve the school system problem, we don't have that capacity, but we have the capacity to go in these neighborhoods and in these communities, so beyond the walls of our building, which is a beautiful building, but beyond those walls, we can go into these communities, into these schools, into these cultural institutions, and excite these kids and get them to understand where they live, lounge, and learn that they too can do this stuff. Which is why I want every kid to have a field trip at at COSI, but I also want our COSI, our great educational team, to be out in the communities, not just New Albany. I want them there too, and I want them in Bexley, but I also want them in the more distressed communities, making science and just excitement come alive in these kids, because that way they feel like if they can feel that in their neighborhoods, then they're like, wait a minute, this is something that I like and I can possibly do. And so that's a big role that a science center like COSI can have.
You know, more and more universities are having initiatives around the theme of science policy and really looking at the intersection between government, business, and the scientific enterprise. Are there policy recommendations that you would have or things that you're concerned about beyond immediate budgetary concerns and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, that's a no-brainer question. It's a great question, but it's a no-brainer response. And that's just like I was talking about, you wouldn't go to a thoracic surgeon if you had car issues and vice versa, right? You'd go to that expert. I would love for there to be a policy that if you're going to be a politician, that's going to be making decisions about medicine or climate change, that you have some level of expertise in that. If you look at Congress and if you look at the House of Representatives, I mean, it's staggering that the men and women that are writing the laws and the men and women that are making decisions on the law, it's staggering that there's an overwhelming lack of skill set in that group. And that's just a big problem.
I'm getting a signal here. Oh, I'm sorry. Please. And we have microphones. Questions from the audience.
You started talking about GMOs. I came from an ag background, and I just scratched my head that the agricultural industry, the food industry has been improving food for, centuries? And now all of a sudden we're all nervous about it. Talk to that a little bit. What's your perspective of that, and what's it mean for us as consumers?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question, and you just nailed it. That's the funniest thing about this whole GMO discussion. First of all, long before humans were doing this, the planet's been undergoing genetic modification constantly. Right? Plants have been doing this for years. Then enter humans. We've been genetically modifying food from the days of Mendel and his green peas. This is nothing new. But somewhere, and I don't know, where in the landscape of the last 10 years, a lightning rod was shot about, oh, but this is different. And it's not different. In fact, to be honest, we know more science today in 2017 than we did, in 2000 than we did in 1980. And so our capacity to make smart decisions of how to modify foods to hopefully feed more population, et cetera, are actually better. But you nailed it. I mean, we've been doing this for centuries. And so all of a sudden it's an issue now, which is interesting.
You'll have some faculty at Ohio State in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences who will justifiably claim pride in helping develop new strains of, I think it was seeds for wheat, that actually yielded much greater harvests in climates that were hostile to wheat growing, and therefore, in fact, headed off mass starvation.
Yeah.
But
imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine growing wheat in non-arable land, right? So places that have deserts, now you can grow because they don't need to be high. No, absolutely. I mean, so thank you for that question.
Yes, please.
My name's Bill Ball, and I have a question. You were talking about museums and schools and providing the science education. One thing I observed that, and maybe this is partly the intimidation factor, in a school you have to enroll, it's a year-long class or a semester-long class, it's very intense and very deep. You go to a museum, and if you really watch, as been to a lot of museums with kids and so forth, people go by those exhibits so fast. And the willingness to engage with the content, it tends to be, from my observation, very shallow. Like, I want to see it all in 2 hours.
Sure.
And so the gulf between that super fast walkthrough and whole school program is tremendous. So I'm just curious your thoughts about some intermediate levels of engagement. Are there ways that people can engage with the material at a museum in a deeper way, including kids, and for a longer span that's not a whole class?
Sure. So a couple of responses to that. First of all, and I'll speak mainly about science museums, but science museums, there's a lot of data now that says one visit a year to a science museum or science center changes the individual, child or adult, their individual's comfort with learning about science. So even if you do a rocket, and I hear you, I've seen that, kids race through, or adults for that matter, race through, even if they're whipping through the exhibits, the very fact that they're physically there and feeling happy and playing in these exhibit spaces actually has a positive effect on their comfort to learn about science. And then the data goes on to show that the predictors for being successful in science, technology, engineering, math in undergrad aren't how many AP courses you did, aren't if you were part of the IB program, but it's your comfort and facility with the idea of science. And so that's amazing. In terms of making sure the experience can be deeper at a science museum? That's a great question, and there are a lot of programs. For instance, what we do with classes that are coming in often, we do pre-work with the teachers where we can send them materials about the exhibit so they can kind of go over that with them in the class before they come on site so they can be a little more familiar. But any visit to a museum in general has a positive effect. In terms of the school being more intimidating, I mean, the picture I showed with the class that was empty, the problem there isn't school specifically, it's school as it is today. It's just boring and terrible and bad for the most part. I mean, it really is. And so I love school. I mean, if we had more metros and we had more other examples of that, kids would love it. We had a school that we opened in my previous job in Philadelphia called Science Leadership Academy. It's a public school. You know, the entry kids, you have a subset who are A students, subset who are B, some C, some on the threshold of failing. They all come in grade 9. Our school hours were 8 to 4. Our school hours now are 7 to 7 because the kids didn't want to leave the school because they loved learning in that environment. So I'm not anti-school. I think we need to fix schools. And then to your point, I mean, you know, having a nice gradient from, you know, a school to that informal space would be great. But the last thing I want to say is that self-guided ability, that free learning that museums offer, art museums or science museums, that is also fantastic. Kids and adults can go through these things at their own pace, and therefore they're learning how they want to learn. So, yep. Yes.
Hi, my name is Olivia Guglielmato, and I had heard your interview with Ann Fisher on WOSU, and you mentioned it a little bit here today, but how science is seen a lot of times as such an ivory tower that's very inaccessible to people that maybe just want to casually learn something exciting about science. So I was wondering if you had any recommendations for whether it's media or resources or books, podcasts, TV shows, or just things that would get people to engage with science on a more, just like if you're going to pick up a book for pleasure that's not necessarily for work or for education or something. Just how do we get people excited about science on like a day-to-day level that, oh, I can go home and read this book, or I can listen to this podcast, or whatever medium it may be.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, we got, for example, I'll speak about COSI and then I'll generalize. At COSI, we have this series called COSI Science Now. Again, that features Dr. Paul Sutter. And what he does is he has these very short, cool videos that talk about specific things around science that the average layperson can go and watch a 3-minute video and be like, oh, that's how black holes work. Or that's how, you know, dark matter functions, et cetera. And so video, I mean, YouTube has proven that video is king and queen. So really short videos are great ways of doing this stuff. 2, this is why, again, I like Columbus, because it's a collaborative city. I can't wait to work with OSU, work with Capital, work with Audubon. I saw the chief of staff somewhere from Audubon here. You know, these institutions have these scientists who hold on to this great knowledge. Well, we're going to have a speaker series at COSI where they come down to COSI, interact with our educators, and we have a great skill set at helping those ivory tower scientists be more accessible and affable to the audience. And then you have these public forums, and people can come in and ask, oh, that's what Smart Cities is all about. That's why I should be jazzed that Columbus won this big grant. Look at the technology that's involved in these driverless cars, and now I really understand it. Or, oh, I have this cell phone. That's how it works, because we had some folks from Capital or OSU come and explain the science behind it, but in a way that we can digest. So a combination of video stuff is always fun, because you can do that at your own pace as well, but also making the science come alive with real people who can speak a language that a larger audience can appreciate and understand. And we just have to, I mean, I use the word demystify, but it's so funny. Scientists actually mystify stuff, right? Because the Petri dish isn't jumping off the plate with all this Latin language. It is what it is. It's a piece of bacteria. But then we codify it and call it all these deep, weird, long words, and then people are like, I don't get that. You know, we have to do a better job at making things accessible.
Hello, I'm Mary Urena, and welcome to Columbus, Dr. Bertley. I wanted to ask a question more on the ethical side of science, and that is whenever there's a scientific discovery that then becomes introduced into our culture and society, there are ramifications for that. Where does the space for we can, but should we discussion happen in your view of science education?
I mean, that's a great question. Kind of back to your question about politics. I mean, ethics for me is a human issue, right? And science, again, is a process. You're collecting your data, the data is what it is, and you're analyzing whatever. But the ethics comes in when we humanize stuff. And I'll use two examples. Two fantastic kind of technological advancements was the creation of a ship, all right, a sea ship. Well, you can use a sea vessel to, get aboard and discover the world and, plant your flag and meet new cultures and interact and, broaden your mind. Or you could take the ship and pack it with human cargo, and now you have the transatlantic slave trade, right? Major ethical issues around the scientific and technological development of the ship, but it's not the science of the ship, it's humans, how they're applying. I'll use another example. For me, the greatest discovery in the 20th century, bar none, is atomic theory and splitting the atom, right? So you can use nuclear energy for transportation, you can use it to heat homes, you can use it for a lot of positive things, or you can create atomic bombs and have a massive nuclear, warfare and drop bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Now we can get into stop the war, and that's a good thing. But my point is, right, nuclear energy in itself isn't unethical. The human beings that are applying it are making decisions. And that's why I talked about STEM, but really, and you've probably heard this term, I like talking about STEAM because I need to include the arts in that. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And that's why art museums are critical. That's why dance and this whole cultural movement is important, because that's the human piece. And so as a scientist, we can explore and get the data, et cetera, but we also need to be well-rounded so that we're asking good questions that are going to benefit the human family, and that we're using and applying the science tools in a way that can be positive.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Young. I was wondering what originally sparked your curiosity and love and passion for science? And also, can you tell us a little bit more about your background before coming to COSI, what you were involved in?
Sure. So how much time do I have? I want to be respectful to the audience. I got 5? All right. So my team is laughing at me because they know exactly what I'm about to show. Bear with me for a minute. So this... The good old days. I laugh at this because, and you've heard me, my team has heard me say this, if you can see it in the back, I'm drooling. My wife will tell you I still drool when I sleep, but obviously I can't grow hair anymore. All right, so how did I go from that to be a scientist? It's a true story, but it's a funny story. Again, 70s, 80s kid. Does anybody recognize this? Oh, yeah. All right, right? This was one of the earliest handheld video games. It's called Coleco head-to-head football. And I had a paper route. My parents finally let me buy this with my paper route money, and it took these square batteries, and it would chew through these batteries. I mean, you get 2 hours of playing, and it's done. And so, I'd go through a battery, and I'd try to go to Radio Shack, get another battery. Finally, I couldn't afford the batteries. And so I went downstairs, found an old lamp, cut off the cable of the lamp, brought upstairs, opened the back, and there's a red and black wire, right? Attached the lamp wire to the red and black wire, plugged it into the wall. Best 10 seconds of my life, all right? I was playing, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna play my video game for hours and hours. And by the 11th second, poof, right? Right by the outlet, charred the outlet, and my dad, my parents were from the Caribbean, my dad's from Trinidad, comes down the stairs. Now my dad, from Trinidad, but he'd been in Canada. He came to go to McGill, and he'd been there since 17 years old, right? He's now in his, 40s or whatever. He does not have a Trinidad accent until he's upset. So he runs downstairs, he's like, son, what are you doing? You're trying to burn down the house. And I'm like, no, I just, right? But the point is, what I realized was, oh my word, this thing called electricity is really interesting. It's way more complex than just the outlet or the light switch. That there's something that's happening behind that wall. And that got me hooked on, wow, what's science about in nature and just discovery. And so real quick, my background is that led me to, I also, like sports, but being 5'7", I wasn't gonna make the NBA. And so fast forward, I went to McGill undergrad where I studied mathematics and physiology, and then I did my PhD in immunology at McGill, and then I came to the US to go to Harvard Medical School as part of a research team there, did HIV vaccine research development for a lot of time, and then was cross-point at MIT doing the same sort of thing. But I've also been heavily involved in education. So I taught at every level, from elementary school to middle school to high school to Roxbury Community College, which is just probably the grittiest, toughest community college on the planet, to Harvard Medical School first. So I've always been involved in in education. And then I did a stint for 3 years, at a law firm doing intellectual property. As a person who had a PhD in life science, if you're coming out with a breast cancer drug or something, as a scientist, you want to get a patent. Patent's a legal document. The lawyers have to write it, but the lawyers don't know if the science is real. They would hire persons with engineering backgrounds or science backgrounds to help them prosecute those patents. So I did that for a while, then I went back to research, and then a colleague of mine at MIT said, you know, there's this place called the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. They're looking for a senior executive to run their science and education stuff, and always being passionate about education, always being passionate about science. Science centers are the ideal places for people with my interest and skill set. So I worked there for 9 years, did a lot of fun, real great things, and then, you know, the ideal institution came calling. That's COSI. And again, I get to follow this great man's, Dr. Chesbro's shoes over here to take it to its next level. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I think COSI is in good hands for the foreseeable future, given your enthusiasm. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Hope all of you enjoyed today's forum. We encourage you to continue the conversation with coffees and cookies outside. You can view and share today's forum and all the forums on CTV, Columbus Television on WOSU, and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Please help me thank our sponsors today, Cornica COSI Construction. Thank you very much. And again, to our speakers, Dr. Frederic Bertley and Herb Asher. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.